The morning sun cast long shadows across the bustling marketplace of New Geneva Colony, where humans and aliens conducted their daily business in what most considered peaceful coexistence. 8-year-old Maya Chen clutched her mother's shopping list tightly as she weaved between the towering forms of Cathurian traders and the crystalline structures that served as temporary stalls for the silicon-based Jevak merchants. Her small legs carried her quickly toward the produce section where her favorite vendor, old Mrs. Patterson, always saved the ripest earth-grown apples for her. Maya had made this journey dozens of times before. The colony's marketplace was considered one of the safest zones in the entire sector, monitored by both human security forces and the Galactic Peacekeeping Corps. Children often ran errands here alone, and parents thought nothing of sending their little ones to pick up groceries or deliver messages between shops. The universal translator devices worn by most species ensured smooth communication, and the strict non-aggression protocols maintained by all member species of the Galactic Council had created an atmosphere of trust and cooperation. Officer Zethkar of the Hegemony Enforcement Division stood nearly 3 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lighting. His species, the Vorthak, had joined the galactic community only recently, and many still viewed them with suspicion due to their aggressive nature and warrior culture. Zethkar had been assigned to this backwater human colony as part of a cultural exchange program, though he considered it more of a punishment posting. His multiple compound eyes tracked movement across the marketplace with predatory precision, and his mandibles clicked with barely contained irritation as he watched the chaos of commerce unfold before him. The Vorthak had ruled through strength for millennia before encountering other spacefaring civilizations. Their society valued dominance, hierarchy, and absolute obedience to authority. To Zethkar, the casual way humans interacted with their betters was a constant source of irritation. He watched as human children ran freely between the legs of beings that could crush them without effort, as human adults spoke to alien dignitaries as equals rather than showing proper deference, and as the entire species seemed oblivious to the natural order that should govern all civilized interactions. Maya had just collected her apples and was counting out the small denomination credits when she accidentally bumped into Zethkar's armored leg. The impact was minimal, barely noticeable to a being of his size, but the young girl stumbled backward and dropped several of her precious apples. They rolled across the dirty marketplace floor, and Maya immediately dropped to her knees to gather them up, her small voice apologizing profusely in the way children do when they know they've done something wrong. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the marketplace. I didn't see you there, sir. I'm really sorry. For most beings in the galactic community, this would have been a minor incident, easily forgotten. A child's accident, followed by sincere apologies, typically warranted nothing more than a gentle word or perhaps a helping hand to gather the dropped items. But Zethkar saw something entirely different. He saw disrespect for authority, a lack of proper protocol, and most importantly, an opportunity to establish the natural order that he felt was sorely lacking in this chaotic human settlement. You dare to strike an officer of the hegemony? Zethkar's voice boomed through his translator, the mechanical tone somehow making his words even more menacing. His mandibles spread wide in an aggressive display that was universally recognized as a threat gesture among his species. You insignificant larvae show no respect for your betters. Maya looked up with wide, frightened eyes, clutching the rescued apples against her chest. At 8 years old, she had no understanding of galactic politics or interspecies relations. She only knew that the massive creature towering over her seemed very angry, and she was alone and scared. Tears began to well up in her eyes as she tried to stammer out another apology, but Zethkar's rage was building beyond any reasonable response to the situation. In my world, such insolence would result in immediate punishment, he continued, his voice rising to levels that were beginning to attract attention from nearby shoppers. You will learn proper respect. The marketplace began to quiet as various species turned their attention toward the commotion. Most aliens recognized the signs of Vorthak aggression and wisely began to step away from the confrontation, but several humans started moving closer, their protective instincts activated by the sight of a small child in distress. Mrs. Patterson abandoned her stall entirely and began pushing through the crowd, her grandmother's instincts overriding any concern for her own safety. Zethkar's primary arm, a limb that could easily lift a full-grown human, swept downward toward the cowering child. What happened next would be debated in council chambers and military briefings for years to come, but the basic facts were undeniable. Maya tried to dodge the incoming strike, her small body moving with the quick reflexes common to human children, but she wasn't fast enough. The armored appendage caught her across the shoulder and sent her flying nearly 4 meters across the marketplace floor. The sound of her small body hitting the ground was lost in the sudden, absolute silence that fell over the entire marketplace. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, every being present simply stared at the crumpled form of the human child, her bright yellow dress now stained with dust, and her left arm bent at an unnatural angle. The apples she had been protecting scattered once again, but this time they rolled through a small pool of blood that had begun to form beneath her head. Maya's consciousness flickered in and out as pain flooded her small nervous system. Through the haze, she could hear voices, but they seemed to come from very far away. Someone was calling her name, but the sound was muffled and strange. She tried to move, tried to sit up and show everyone that she was okay, but her body wouldn't respond properly. The taste of copper filled her mouth, and she realized dimly that she was bleeding. Mrs. Patterson reached Maya first, her hands shaking as she carefully checked for vital signs without moving the injured child. Her medical training from decades of frontier life kicked in automatically, and she immediately began calling for emergency services while trying to stabilize Maya's position. Other humans formed a protective circle around the fallen child, their faces showing a range of emotions that most alien species had never seen before. The silence stretched on for another few seconds before being shattered by a sound that would haunt the nightmares of every non-human present for the rest of their lives. It started low, almost subsonic, rising from the throats of the assembled humans like the growl of some massive predator. It was a sound of pure, primal rage, the kind of vocalization that evolution had programmed into the most dangerous species to warn everything else to run, to hide, to pray that they wouldn't be next. Dr. Sarah Chen had been reviewing surgical notes in her office when the emergency alert came through her communicator. Medical emergency, marketplace district, child involved, immediate response required. The message was routine enough, but something about the tone of the dispatcher's voice made her blood run cold. She grabbed her medical kit and ran for the door, not bothering to wait for the transport that would arrive in a few minutes. As the colony's chief medical officer, she had responded to hundreds of emergency calls over the years, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this one was different. She arrived at the marketplace to find a scene that defied her understanding. Dozens of humans had formed multiple concentric circles around something on the ground, and their posture was unlike anything she had seen before. They stood completely still, but every line of their bodies suggested coiled violence. The aliens who had been shopping and trading minutes before were pressed against the far walls of the marketplace, their various forms of body language all expressing the same emotion: terror. As Sarah pushed through the crowd, she began to hear fragments of conversation that made her stomach clench with dread. "She's just a baby," someone whispered. "8 years old," came another voice. "He hit her," said a third, and that simple statement was delivered with such venom that Sarah found herself checking to make sure her sidearm was secure. When she finally reached the center of the crowd, Sarah's medical training warred with her maternal instincts as she saw Maya's broken form lying on the dirty ground. The child was unconscious, blood seeping from a head wound, and her left arm was clearly fractured. But Maya was alive, breathing steadily despite her injuries, and Sarah forced herself to focus on the medical situation rather than the rage that was building in her chest. "Get me transport to the medical center now," she ordered, her hands already working to stabilize Maya's neck and spine. "And someone find her parents immediately." As Sarah worked, she became aware of a presence behind her that made her skin crawl. She turned to see the massive form of the Vorthak officer standing over them, his multiple eyes fixed on the injured child with what might have been satisfaction. In that moment, looking up at the alien who had hurt an innocent child and seemed proud of it, Dr. Sarah Chen felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of the universe. The news of Maya's assault spread through the human colony with the speed that only truly shocking events could achieve. Within an hour, every human on New Geneva knew what had happened. Within 2 hours, the story had reached the human sectors of 3 neighboring systems. Within 6 hours, it had been transmitted to Earth itself, where it landed on the desk of Admiral Marcus Webb, Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces. Admiral Webb read the preliminary report twice before setting it down with hands that trembled slightly with suppressed rage. He had seen combat across a dozen worlds, had made the hard decisions that came with protecting humanity's interests in a dangerous galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for this. A Vorthak officer had struck down a human child in what was supposed to be a safe, neutral zone, and according to all reports, the Galactic Council was treating it as a minor diplomatic incident rather than the act of war it truly represented. Webb activated his emergency command protocols and began issuing orders that would set events in motion across the entire human sphere of influence. Get me a direct line to every colony world with a human population. I want the location and status of every human ship, station, and outpost. And find me everything we know about Vorthak military capabilities and territorial claims. His aide, Colonel Martinez, had served with Webb for over a decade and recognized the tone in his superior's voice. "Sir, are we talking about a military response?" Webb looked up from his reports, and Martinez saw something in the Admiral's eyes that he had never seen before, something primitive and dangerous that spoke to humanity's predator ancestry. "Colonel, a member of an alien species just assaulted one of our children and left her bleeding on the ground like a piece of trash. What do you think we're talking about?" As the human command structure began to mobilize, across the galaxy other events were being set in motion. Captain Rosa Delgado of the merchant vessel Aurora's Dream was unloading cargo in the Kepler station when she received the news about Maya. Her crew, a mix of humans and friendly alien species, gathered around the communication console as the reports came in, their faces growing darker with each detail. "Bastard thinks he can hurt our kids," growled Chief Engineer Murphy, his thick accent making his words even more menacing. "We'll see about that." Captain Delgado found herself nodding in agreement, and she realized that something had changed in that moment, something that would affect how humans dealt with the galaxy from now on. They had tried to be good galactic citizens, to follow the rules and work within the established systems, but those systems had failed to protect an innocent child. Now it was time to remind the galaxy exactly why humans were called Deathworlders. Similar conversations were taking place on human ships and stations throughout known space. The assault on Maya Chen had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping since they joined the galactic community, something primal and dangerous that their alien neighbors were about to experience firsthand. The age of playing by other species' rules was coming to an end. The Galactic Council chambers had seen many crises over the centuries, but the emergency session called to address the New Geneva incident carried an atmosphere of tension that even the most experienced diplomats found unsettling. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered in the massive amphitheater that orbited the neutral world of Harmony Station, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, electromagnetic pulses, and translated speech that would have been overwhelming to most beings. Chancellor Velter, an ancient Etherian whose translucent form shimmered with bioluminescent patterns indicating deep concern, called the session to order with the traditional harmonic resonance that served as the council's ceremonial opening. The chamber fell silent as beings that had evolved on worlds separated by thousands of light years focused their attention on the matter at hand. "Honored representatives," Chancellor Velter began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had mediated interspecies conflicts for over 3 centuries. "We gather today to address an incident that has occurred on the human colony world of New Geneva. A member of the Vorthak Enforcement Division has been accused of assaulting a human juvenile during what was described as a minor marketplace altercation." Ambassador Krenthak, the Vorthak representative, rose from his designated platform with the fluid grace that his species had developed over millions of years of evolution. His carapace bore the deep scarring that marked him as a veteran of the species wars that had nearly destroyed his homeworld before their integration into galactic society. When he spoke, his translator rendered his clicking mandible movements into the common tongue with mechanical precision. "Honored Chancellor, my government wishes to express regret that this incident has caused such widespread concern." Officer Zethkar was responding to what he perceived as a direct assault upon his person by maintaining proper disciplinary protocols as outlined in Vorthak cultural law. "We acknowledge that human customs may differ from our own, but we maintain that our officer acted within his rights as a representative of lawful authority." The statement sent ripples of quiet discussion through the assembled representatives. Many species had their own protocols for dealing with juveniles, and the concept of physical correction was not unknown in galactic society. However, the murmured conversations died quickly as Ambassador Elena Vasquez, the human representative, rose from her position. Elena had served as humanity's voice in the Council for nearly a decade, navigating the complex web of interspecies politics with skill and patience that had earned her respect from even the most xenophobic representatives. She was known for her measured responses, her willingness to compromise, and her ability to find diplomatic solutions to seemingly intractable problems. But as she stood before the assembled aliens, those who knew her well could see that something fundamental had changed in her demeanor. "Honored Chancellor, fellow representatives," Elena began, her voice carrying a tone that none of them had heard from her before, "I must respectfully disagree with Ambassador Krentak's characterization of events. What occurred on New Geneva was not a minor altercation or a cultural misunderstanding. A trained military officer, equipped with natural weapons capable of killing most sentient beings, deliberately struck an 8-year-old child with sufficient force to break her bones and render her unconscious. This was not discipline. This was not law enforcement. This was an unprovoked assault on an innocent being who posed no threat to anyone." The chamber remained silent as Elena continued, but several representatives began to notice changes in her posture and vocal patterns that their xenobiological training had taught them to recognize as signs of aggressive intent in human beings. Her breathing had become deeper and more regular, her stance had widened slightly to provide better balance, and most unnervingly, she had begun to make direct eye contact with each representative as she spoke, a behavior that most species found intensely threatening. "Furthermore," Elena continued, "the Council's response to this incident has been to treat it as a diplomatic inconvenience rather than addressing the fundamental question of whether member species have the right to assault the children of other member species without consequence. I am here to inform this Council that humanity's patience with such treatment has reached its end." Chancellor Velter's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what those familiar with Etherian communication recognized as confusion mixed with alarm. "Ambassador Vasquez, surely you do not suggest that the Council has been negligent in its response. The incident occurred less than standard day ago, and we have convened this emergency session to address all concerns. What more would humanity have us do?" Elena's response sent a chill through every being present that would be remembered and discussed in their respective governments for years to come. "What humanity wants, Chancellor, is justice. We want Officer Zethkar removed from his position, formally charged with assault, and turned over to human authorities for trial. We want assurances that no member of any species will ever again raise their hand against a human child. And we want these things not because we ask nicely, but because the alternative is something that none of you want to see." The implicit threat in Elena's words was unmistakable, and the chamber erupted in the various forms of agitated communication used by dozens of different species. Ambassador Krentak's mandibles spread wide in a display of aggression as he responded to what he perceived as an insult to Vorthak's sovereignty. "The human representative threatens this council. Your species was barely capable of interstellar travel when most of our civilizations were already ancient. You dare to make demands of beings whose ancestors ruled star systems when yours were still climbing down from trees." Elena turned her full attention to the Vorthak ambassador, and something in her expression made several nearby representatives instinctively move away from the confrontation. "Ambassador Krentak, you seem to have forgotten something important about my species. We didn't earn the designation Deathworlders by being peaceful farmers. We earned it by being the most successful predators our world ever produced, and predators, Ambassador, protect their young." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the human response to Maya's assault was accelerating beyond anything the Galactic Council could have imagined. Admiral Webb's emergency protocols had activated dormant command structures that most alien species didn't even know existed. Human colonies that had seemed peaceful and cooperative suddenly began displaying levels of organization and military capability that defied their previous assessments. Captain Sarah Mitchell received her orders while her ship, the destroyer Retribution, was conducting routine patrol operations in the Outer Rim. The message was brief and encrypted with codes she hadn't seen since the last human-pirate conflicts nearly a decade earlier. "Code Crimson, protect our own. All measures authorized." Sarah had commanded military vessels for 15 years, but she had never seen orders quite like these. Code Crimson was a theoretical protocol that authorized human military commanders to take any action necessary to protect human civilians from alien threats, up to and including acts that would normally be considered war crimes if committed against other humans. The fact that it had been activated meant that someone very high up in the human command structure had decided that normal diplomatic channels were no longer sufficient. "Communications, get me a secure channel to every human ship in the sector," Sarah ordered as her crew began implementing battle protocols that transformed their vessel from a peaceful patrol ship into a weapon capable of engaging alien fleets. "Navigation, plot courses to every system with significant human populations. Engineering, I want weapon systems at full readiness." Her first officer, Commander James Park, had served with Sarah through several conflicts and recognized the look in her eyes. "Captain, are we talking about war?" Sarah looked at the image of Maya Chen that had been included with their orders, showing the small girl lying unconscious in the marketplace, while a massive alien loomed over her broken form. "Commander, war is what happens between armies. What we're planning is something much more personal than that." Similar conversations were taking place on human vessels throughout known space. The merchant ship Aurora's Dream had transformed from a peaceful cargo hauler into something resembling a Q-ship from Earth's ancient maritime wars, with concealed weapon systems suddenly becoming visible as Captain Delgado prepared for what was coming. The research vessel Darwin's Legacy abandoned its scientific mission and began heading for the nearest human colony, its sensors reconfigured to track alien military movements. Even civilian transports began altering their routes to avoid systems with significant alien military presences. On Earth itself, the response was even more dramatic. Emergency sessions of the Global Parliament authorized military expenditures that hadn't been seen since humanity's expansion into space began. Shipyards that had been producing civilian vessels for decades suddenly retooled for military production. Most ominously, research facilities that had been conducting theoretical studies in exotic physics and xenobiology received funding increases and instructions that suggested their work might soon have very practical applications. Dr. Amanda Foster had spent her career studying alien biology and psychology as part of humanity's efforts to understand their galactic neighbors. Her research on Vorthak physiology was considered the definitive work on their species' capabilities and limitations, but she had always viewed it as purely academic knowledge. When the orders came to prepare briefings on strategic vulnerabilities in Vorthak biology, she realized that her life's work was about to be used for purposes she had never imagined. "They want to know how to hurt them," she told her research team as they gathered in their laboratory beneath the Swiss mountains. "Not just how to fight them, but how to make them suffer in ways that their psychology will find most traumatic." Her assistant, Dr. Kevin Wu, stared at the authorization codes that had accompanied their new mission parameters. "Amanda, these codes are signed by the president himself. What exactly happened out there?" Dr. Foster pulled up the incident reports from New Geneva and displayed them on the laboratory's main screen. The image of Maya Chen's broken form lying in the marketplace filled the wall, and the room fell silent as her team absorbed what they were seeing. "What happened?" Dr. Foster said quietly, "is that someone hurt one of our children, and now they're going to learn why humanity is called Deathworlders." Back on New Geneva, Maya Chen lay in a medical pod that represented the pinnacle of human medical technology, her small body surrounded by machines that monitored every aspect of her recovery. The head injury had been more serious than initially thought, requiring surgical intervention to relieve pressure on her brain. Her left arm had been shattered in 3 places, though the automated reconstruction systems were already beginning the delicate work of rebuilding the damaged bone structure. Her parents, David and Lin Chen, maintained a constant vigil beside her bed, their faces showing the exhaustion and terror that came with watching their child fight for her life. Dr. Sarah Chen, who shared no family relation to Maya despite the common surname, had become like a guardian angel to them, explaining each procedure and providing updates on Maya's progress with the gentle expertise that made her one of the colony's most trusted physicians. "The brain swelling has gone down significantly," Dr. Chen explained to the anxious parents during one of her regular updates. "Her neural activity is returning to normal patterns, and I'm optimistic that she'll make a full recovery. The bone reconstruction will take several more weeks, but the automated systems are already showing good integration with her natural healing processes. David Chen, who worked as a hydroponics engineer for the colony's agricultural systems, had been struggling to understand how something like this could happen in what was supposed to be a safe, peaceful community. Dr. Chen, why would he do this? She's just a little girl. She was apologizing, trying to pick up her apples. Why would anyone hurt a child like that? Dr. Chen had been asking herself the same question since the incident occurred, and she was beginning to realize that the answer lay in fundamental differences between species that the galactic community had never properly addressed. David, I think we've been making an assumption about our alien neighbors that may have been naive. We assumed that because they were intelligent, because they had developed spaceflight and joined the galactic community, that they shared our values about protecting children and avoiding unnecessary violence. Maya's assault has shown us that this assumption may have been dangerously wrong. Lin Chen, who taught at the colony's primary school and had spent years working with human children of all ages, found herself thinking about all the alien visitors who had passed through their community over the years. Do you think there have been other incidents? Other times when alien species have hurt humans and we just didn't know about it? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered but deeply troubling. None of them knew that across human space, similar questions were being asked and investigated. None of them knew that intelligence agencies were combing through years of incident reports, looking for patterns of alien aggression that had been dismissed as accidents or misunderstandings. And none of them knew that what they found was going to change humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. Outside Maya's medical facility, a crowd of humans had maintained a constant presence since the assault occurred. They came in shifts, bringing flowers and small gifts for Maya, but also serving as an unofficial guard to ensure that no alien presence could threaten the injured child again. The crowd was quiet and orderly, but anyone who looked closely could see that they were also alert and ready for trouble. Among the crowd were people from every level of colonial society. Farmers and engineers stood alongside teachers and administrators, united by their shared humanity and their collective outrage over what had been done to one of their children. They didn't speak much among themselves, but they didn't need to. Everyone understood why they were there, and everyone understood what it meant. As evening fell over New Geneva Colony, the crowd began to light candles in a tradition that stretched back to humanity's earliest civilizations. The small flames flickered in the darkness, hundreds of tiny lights that represented humanity's refusal to let the darkness win. But as the night deepened, observers might have noticed that the candlelight also revealed the hard expressions on human faces, and the way their hands never strayed far from tools and implements that could serve as weapons if necessary. The message was clear to any alien who might be watching. Humanity was still willing to hope for peace, but they were also prepared for war. And as news of Maya's condition spread through human communication networks, that message was being received and understood across the galaxy. The age of easy cooperation was ending, and what came next would depend entirely on how the galactic community chose to respond to humanity's demands for justice. The Vorthak hegemony's response to humanity's demands came 72 hours after Ambassador Vasquez had delivered her ultimatum to the Galactic Council. War Leader Krexkin, Supreme Commander of all Vorthak military forces, transmitted a message that was broadcast simultaneously to every human world, station, and ship in known space. The content of that message would later be studied in military academies as a perfect example of how catastrophically wrong alien intelligence assessments of human psychology could be. To the humans who dare to threaten the sovereignty of the Vorthak hegemony, the translated message began, we respond to your ultimatum with the contempt it deserves. Officer Zethkar acted within his authority to maintain order and discipline. Your larval offspring showed disrespect to a superior being and received appropriate correction. We will not surrender any member of our species to your primitive justice system, nor will we accept restrictions on how Vorthak officers maintain order in territories under our jurisdiction. The message continued with detailed descriptions of Vorthak military capabilities, including their fleet strength, territorial holdings, and battle honors from conflicts with other species. War Leader Krexkin seemed particularly proud of their role in subjugating 3 different civilizations during the last 2 centuries, and he made specific mention of the efficiency with which Vorthak forces had eliminated resistance movements on conquered worlds. If humanity wishes to test its strength against the proven might of the hegemony, the message concluded, we will accommodate this desire. But know that when your worlds burn and your children serve as laborers in our industries, you will remember this moment when you chose conflict over submission. Admiral Webb received the Vorthak response while standing in the command center of Earth's primary orbital defense platform, surrounded by displays showing the current positions of human military assets throughout the galaxy. When the translation finished playing, the chamber fell silent except for the hum of computer systems processing tactical data. Every officer present understood that they had just heard a declaration of war. But more than that, they had heard threats against human children delivered with casual arrogance that suggested the Vorthak considered such threats routine. Communications, Admiral Webb said in a voice that carried the accumulated authority of decades of military service. Transmit the following message to every human ship, station, and settlement. Code Black is now in effect. All human civilians are to be evacuated from mixed alien territories immediately. All human military assets are to assume combat readiness. All previously classified protocols regarding alien threats are now authorized for immediate implementation. His aide, Colonel Martinez, felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what Code Black meant. Unlike Code Crimson, which authorized aggressive action in defense of human interests, Code Black was the final escalation in human military doctrine, the code that meant humanity was preparing for total war against an alien species. It was a designation that had been developed during humanity's expansion into space, but had never been used, because the assumption had always been that no alien species would be foolish enough to force humanity into such a position. Sir, Colonel Martinez said carefully, Code Black authorizes the use of weapons and tactics that the Galactic Council has classified as war crimes. Are we prepared for the diplomatic consequences of implementing these protocols? Admiral Webb turned to face his aide, and Martinez saw something in the Admiral's eyes that reminded him why humans were called Deathworlders. Colonel, the Vorthak just threatened to enslave our children and burn our worlds. Do you think I care what the Galactic Council thinks of our response? Across human space, the implementation of Code Black protocols created changes that alien observers would later describe as watching a peaceful species transform into something unrecognizable. Human merchant vessels began broadcasting distress signals that brought human warships racing to their positions, only to discover that the distressed ships had actually been serving as bait to draw alien vessels into carefully prepared ambushes. Research stations began producing technologies that violated several galactic treaties on exotic weapons development. Most disturbing of all, human settlements began implementing evacuation procedures that left behind automated defense systems of terrifying capability. Captain Sarah Mitchell's destroyer Retribution was part of the first wave of human ships to implement Code Black protocols. Her orders were simple: locate and intercept Vorthak military vessels, disable their communications to prevent them from warning their fleets, and gather intelligence on Vorthak military capabilities through any means necessary. The Vorthak patrol ship Crushing Talon was conducting routine operations in the Kepler sector when it detected an approaching vessel on long-range sensors. The ship appeared to be a human merchant freighter, broadcasting standard commercial identification codes and requesting assistance with what appeared to be engine problems. It was exactly the kind of encounter that Vorthak crews had been having with humans for years, typically resulting in minor technical exchanges, and the kind of routine interspecies cooperation that kept galactic commerce functioning smoothly. Commander Vexthal of the Crushing Talon followed standard protocols and altered course to render assistance. His crew was relaxed and confident, secure in their knowledge that human vessels were lightly armed and posed no threat to a proper military ship. The freighter appeared to be experiencing genuine difficulties, with erratic engine emissions and communications that suggested a crew struggling with mechanical failures. As the Crushing Talon approached within weapons range, the human freighter's distress signals suddenly ceased. The vessel's engine emissions stabilized into patterns that suggested full combat power, and sensor readings began detecting energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible from a civilian ship. Commander Vexthal was still trying to process these conflicting readings when the freighter's hull began to reconfigure itself, revealing weapon systems that had been concealed beneath false plating. The engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. The Retribution, disguised as the merchant vessel Peaceful Trader, unleashed a barrage of experimental weapons that overwhelmed the Vorthak ship's defenses with technologies that their engineers had never encountered. Plasma beams that could penetrate their armor, gravitational mines that distorted space-time around their hull, and most terrifying of all, nanoscale weapons that began consuming their ship systems from the inside out. Commander Vexthal found himself trapped in a dying ship, his crew dead or incapacitated, facing enemies who had appeared from nowhere and demonstrated capabilities that defied everything the Vorthak knew about human technology. As his ship's systems failed around him, he activated his personal communicator to broadcast a final message to Hegemony Command. "The humans are not what we thought they were. They are not what anyone thought they were. Warn the fleets. Warn everyone." The transmission was cut short as the Retribution's boarding parties breached the crushing Talon's hull. What happened during the next several hours would never appear in official records, but when the human ship departed, Commander Vexthal and two of his surviving crew members had provided detailed intelligence on Vorthak fleet movements, base locations, and military protocols. The methods used to extract this information would have horrified the Galactic Council, but they were entirely consistent with Code Black authorization for any means necessary to protect human interests. Similar engagements were taking place throughout the border regions where human and Vorthak territories overlapped. Alien observers who investigated the aftermath of these encounters found scenes that challenged their understanding of human capabilities. Vorthak warships that should have been able to defeat any human vessel lay dead in space, their hulls breached by weapons that seemed to violate known physics. Surviving Vorthak crew members spoke in terrified whispers about humans who fought like demons, who showed no mercy to enemies who had threatened their children, and who possessed technologies that suggested they had been hiding their true capabilities for decades. On Earth, Dr. Amanda Foster's research team was working around the clock to provide tactical intelligence that would give human forces every possible advantage in the developing conflict. Their detailed studies of Vorthak biology and psychology were being translated into weapons and tactics specifically designed to exploit alien weaknesses. "Their exoskeletons are incredibly strong, but they're also brittle," Dr. Foster explained to a group of military engineers who were developing new ammunition types. "A direct impact won't penetrate, but harmonic resonance at specific frequencies can cause catastrophic structural failure. Their hearing is also much more sensitive than ours, which means sonic weapons will be far more effective against them than against human targets." The engineers took notes eagerly, already visualizing how to implement these biological insights into practical weapon systems. But Dr. Foster's most important contribution wasn't in the realm of biology, it was in psychology. Her studies of Vorthak culture had revealed fundamental assumptions about warfare that humans could exploit. "They expect enemies to behave according to their cultural concepts of honor and proper military conduct," she continued. "They have specific protocols for surrender, for treatment of prisoners, for acceptable tactics in warfare. But humans who are protecting their children don't follow alien concepts of honor. We fight to win, by any means necessary, and that's going to come as a very unpleasant surprise to them." Back on New Geneva, Maya Chen had begun to wake up for brief periods, though she remained heavily sedated to manage her pain and allow her injuries to heal. During her moments of consciousness, she asked for her parents and wondered why everyone seemed so serious and worried. She had no understanding of the galactic crisis that had erupted because of her assault, no knowledge that her name was being spoken in war councils and command centers throughout human space. Her parents maintained their vigil, but they had begun to notice changes in the colony around them. Alien visitors, once common in New Geneva's marketplaces and administrative centers, had disappeared almost entirely. Human residents moved with a purposefulness that suggested they were preparing for something significant. Most noticeably, construction crews had begun installing defensive systems around critical facilities, including the medical center where Maya was recovering. Dr. Sarah Chen provided medical updates on Maya's condition, but she had also begun receiving briefings on the larger situation from colonial security forces. As the colony's chief medical officer, she needed to be prepared for the possibility that New Geneva might become a target for Vorthak retaliation. "The good news is that Maya's recovery is proceeding better than expected," she told the Chen family during one of her evening updates. "Her brain function is returning to normal, and the bone reconstruction is showing excellent progress. She should be able to go home within a week." David Chen noticed that Dr. Chen seemed distracted, and that her optimism about Maya's recovery was tempered by something that looked like concern about bigger issues. "Doctor, what's happening out there? We hear rumors about military ships, about evacuations from other colonies. Are we safe here?" Dr. Chen hesitated before answering, weighing how much truth the worried parents needed to hear. "David, Lin, I want you to know that Maya is going to be fine. Her injuries were serious, but she's young and strong, and she's healing well. As for the larger situation, I can tell you that humanity is taking steps to ensure that what happened to Maya doesn't happen to any other human child. Those steps may involve some difficult decisions." Lin Chen, with the intuition that came from years of teaching children, sensed that Dr. Chen was trying to shield them from something terrible. "Doctor, please, we need to know what's coming." Dr. Chen looked at the sleeping form of Maya, so small and fragile in the medical bed, and then at her parents who deserved honesty about the situation their daughter's assault had created. "What's coming," she said quietly, "is justice, human justice, and I don't think the galaxy is prepared for what that means." Outside the medical center, the human crowd maintained their vigil, their candles burning steadily in the darkness. But observers who looked closely might have noticed that the crowd had grown larger over the past few days, and that many of the new arrivals wore clothing and carried equipment that suggested military backgrounds. New Geneva colony was preparing for war, and at the center of that preparation lay a small girl who had become the symbol of everything humanity was fighting to protect. The Galactic Council was beginning to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in the known galaxy. A species that had seemed peaceful and cooperative was revealing capabilities and a level of ruthlessness that defied every assessment their xenobiologists had ever made. Humanity wasn't just responding to the assault on Maya Chen with diplomatic protests or limited military action. They were preparing for total war, and they were demonstrating technologies and tactics that suggested they had been hiding their true nature since the day they joined the galactic community. Chancellor Velter convened emergency sessions with representatives from every major spacefaring civilization, trying to find some way to prevent the developing crisis from escalating into the kind of interspecies war that could devastate entire sectors of the galaxy. But as reports came in from border regions where human and Vorthak forces were clashing, it became clear that events had already moved beyond the point where diplomatic intervention might be effective. The humans had made their choice. They would protect their own, regardless of the cost, and the galaxy was about to learn why Deathworlders were given that designation in the first place. The Battle of Proxima Centauri marked the moment when the galaxy realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been terribly, catastrophically wrong. War leader Krexkin had assembled the largest Vorthak fleet in over a century, comprising more than 200 warships ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swift attack cruisers. Intelligence reports suggested that the human presence in the Proxima system consisted of a small research station and perhaps a dozen lightly armed patrol vessels. It should have been a simple demonstration of Vorthak's superiority, a quick victory that would force humanity to accept their demands and return to their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. The Vorthak fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their ships arranged in the traditional battle pattern that had served them well in conflicts with dozens of other species. War leader Krexkin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Conquest, and prepared to broadcast the surrender demands that would end this foolish human rebellion before it could do any real damage. "Human vessels," his transmission began, "you are facing the might of the hegemony's third battle fleet. You have 10 standard minutes to surrender unconditionally and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your forces and the occupation of this system. This is your only warning." The response came from Admiral Elena Vasquez, who had traveled from the Galactic Council to take personal command of humanity's response to Vorthak aggression. Her image appeared on Krexkin's communication screen, and the Vorthak commander was surprised to see that she showed no signs of fear or desperation. Instead, she looked calm, confident, and most disturbing of all, slightly amused. "War leader Krexkin," Admiral Vasquez said, "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Human Defense Forces. I have a counter-proposal for you. You have 60 seconds to surrender your fleet and prepare to be taken into custody for crimes against humanity. Any resistance will result in consequences that your species has never imagined." Krexkin's mandibles spread wide in what his species considered laughter. though the sound that emerged was more like the clicking of hunting insects. The idea that a handful of human ships would demand the surrender of a full Vorthak battle fleet was so absurd that he initially wondered if there had been some error in translation. "Human Admiral," he replied, "your species' arrogance will be remembered as a cautionary tale throughout the galaxy. You face 200 warships crewed by the finest warriors in known space. What could you possibly have that would threaten such a force?" Admiral Vasquez's smile became wider, and something in her expression made several Vorthak officers on the bridge take involuntary steps backward. "War leader, you're about to discover why humanity earned the designation Deathworlders. But first, let me share something with you." The communication screen split, showing Admiral Vasquez on one side and a recording of Maya Chen's assault on the other. Krexkin watched as Officer Zethkar struck down the human child, sending her small body flying across the marketplace. He had seen the recording before, but he was puzzled by the Admiral's decision to show it during what should have been surrender negotiations. "That child," Admiral Vasquez said, her voice carrying undertones that made the Vorthak bridge crew shift nervously, "is named Maya Chen. She is 8 years old. She likes drawing pictures of flowers and wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. Your subordinate nearly killed her because she accidentally bumped into him while apologizing profusely for the minor contact." The communication feed showed Maya lying unconscious in the medical facility, her small form surrounded by machines keeping her alive, her parents weeping beside her bed. Krexkin was beginning to understand that this wasn't a military briefing. It was something much more personal and therefore much more dangerous. "You want to know what we have, War Leader?" Admiral Vasquez continued, and now her voice carried harmonics that activated fear responses in species throughout the galaxy. "We have rage. We have 200 years of technological development that we've kept hidden because we hope to be good galactic citizens, and we have absolutely nothing left to lose because you threatened our children." War Leader Krexkin was about to respond when his tactical officer began reporting sensor readings that defied explanation. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. The human research station is changing, and there are new contacts appearing on our screens that weren't there before." On the main display, the modest research station that intelligence had dismissed as a minor installation began to unfold like a mechanical flower. Hidden panels retracted to reveal weapon systems that dwarfed anything in the Vorthak arsenal. What had appeared to be a simple scientific facility was actually a fortress that had been disguised to look helpless and vulnerable. But the research station was only the beginning. Throughout the Proxima system, objects that sensors had identified as asteroids, comets, and space debris began to reveal their true nature. Stealth ships that had been waiting motionless for weeks suddenly activated, their hulls shimmering as advanced cloaking systems disengaged. Automated defense platforms that had been floating dormant in the asteroid belt came online with weapon signatures that made even the Eternal Conquest's massive guns look inadequate. "Impossible," Krexkin whispered as his tactical displays filled with more and more contact signatures. "Our intelligence indicated minimal human presence in this system. This fleet, it's larger than ours." Admiral Vasquez's image remained calm and composed as the true scope of the trap became clear. "War Leader, your intelligence was correct when it gathered that data. We built this fleet and positioned it here in the 3 days since your government declared war on humanity. When humans decide to fight, we don't waste time with gradual escalation or measured responses. We commit everything we have to protecting what we love." The first exchange of fire began when a Vorthak cruiser captain, overwhelmed by the tactical situation and desperate to regain some initiative, opened fire on what appeared to be a lone human destroyer. The plasma beams that had served the Vorthak well in dozens of previous conflicts struck the human ship's shields and simply disappeared, absorbed by defensive systems that operated on principles the Vorthak had never encountered. The human response was swift and devastating. The destroyer launched a salvo of missiles that didn't follow ballistic trajectories, but instead moved with intelligent precision, weaving through defensive fire and adjusting their approach vectors in real time. When they impacted the Vorthak cruiser, the explosions didn't just damage the hull, they seemed to consume it, spreading across the ship's surface like metallic cancer that ate through armor and superstructure with equal efficiency. Within minutes, one of the hegemony's most advanced warships had been reduced to a drifting hulk, its crew dead or dying as human nanoscale weapons consumed their vessel from the inside out. The sight of their comrades' destruction sent shockwaves through the Vorthak fleet, but war leader Krexkin rallied his forces and ordered a full assault on the human positions. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration of technological superiority, so complete that it redefined every assumption the galaxy had made about human capabilities. Vorthak weapons, which had proven effective against dozens of alien species, were useless against human shields that seemed to operate outside the normal laws of physics. Human weapons, by contrast, cut through Vorthak defenses as if they were made of paper, destroying ships with single hits and leaving survivors to face weapons that attacked their biology at the cellular level. The human tactics were equally devastating. Rather than engaging in the formal, honor-bound combat that the Vorthak expected, human ships fought like a pack of predators, coordinating their attacks with precision that suggested a level of battlefield communication impossible for organic beings to achieve. They targeted command vessels first, crippling Vorthak ability to coordinate their response. They used psychological warfare, broadcasting the death screams of Vorthak crew members to demoralize survivors. Most terrifyingly, they showed no mercy to enemies who had threatened human children, continuing to attack ships that tried to surrender and hunting down escape pods to prevent any Vorthak survivors from returning to report what they had witnessed. War leader Krexkin found himself commanding the only functional ship remaining in his fleet as human forces systematically destroyed everything around him. His mighty dreadnought, which had seemed invincible just hours before, was now damaged and helpless, its weapons offline and its engines failing. As human ships moved into position around the Eternal Conquest, he realized that his species had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. Admiral Vasquez's image appeared on his screen one final time, and Krexkin could see in her eyes the same predatory intelligence that had made humanity the dominant species on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. "War leader," she said, "I'm going to give you a choice that your subordinate didn't give to Maya Chen. You can surrender now and face trial for crimes against humanity, or you can continue fighting and discover what humans do to beings who threaten our children and refuse to accept justice." Krexkin looked around his bridge, seeing his crew members wounded and terrified, his ship dying around him, his fleet destroyed by an enemy he had never understood. In that moment, he realized that the Vorthak had awakened something in humanity that should have been left sleeping, something primal and terrible that civilized species were never meant to face. I surrender," he said, his voice barely a whisper through his damaged translator. Admiral Vasquez nodded, but her expression remained cold and implacable. "War leader Krexkin, you and your surviving crew members are hereby under arrest for crimes against humanity, conspiracy to commit genocide, and threatening the safety of human children. You will be transported to Earth for trial, where you will face justice under human law." As human boarding parties prepared to take control of the Eternal Conquest, Krexkin realized that his species' threats against human children had unleashed something that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The humans hadn't just defeated a Vorthak fleet. They had revealed capabilities that suggested they could defeat any fleet sent against them. More importantly, they had demonstrated a level of ruthless determination that would make every alien species reconsider their relationship with humanity. News of the Battle of Proxima Centauri spread through galactic communication networks with the speed of truly shocking events. The complete annihilation of the hegemony's third battle fleet by forces that intelligence had assessed as negligible sent waves of panic through alien governments throughout known space. But more disturbing than the military defeat was the clear message that humanity was prepared to use any weapon, any tactic, any level of force necessary to protect their children. Chancellor Velter received the battle reports while in emergency session with the Galactic Council's military advisors, and the content of those reports forced him to confront a reality that none of them had prepared for. The humans hadn't just won a military engagement. They had revealed that they possessed technologies and capabilities that put them on a completely different level from every other species in the galaxy. "How long have they been hiding this?" Chancellor Velter asked his xenobiological advisors. "These weapons, these ships, these tactics. This represents centuries of advanced development that we never detected." Dr. Kethvar, the Council's chief xenobiologist, studied the tactical reports with growing unease. "Chancellor, I believe we may have fundamentally misunderstood human psychology from the beginning. We assumed that their cooperative behavior and peaceful integration into galactic society represented their true nature. But what if that was simply how they chose to behave when they felt their children were safe? The implications of Dr. Kethvar's assessment hung over the council chambers like a dark cloud. If humanity had been hiding their true capabilities all along, if their peaceful cooperation had been a choice rather than a limitation, then every assumption about human psychology and military potential needed to be reconsidered. "Sir," one of the military advisors said quietly, "we're receiving reports that human forces are mobilizing throughout their territory. This wasn't just a single engagement. They're preparing for a full-scale war against the Vorthak hegemony, and preliminary assessments suggest they have the capability to win such a conflict decisively." Chancellor Velter realized that the galaxy was witnessing the emergence of a new superpower, one that had been content to remain in the background until someone made the catastrophic error of threatening their children. The question now was whether the galactic community could find a way to restore peace before humanity decided that the entire alien civilization was a threat that needed to be eliminated. On New Geneva, Maya Chen slept peacefully in her medical bed, unaware that her name had become a rallying cry for human forces throughout the galaxy. Her recovery was proceeding well, and Dr. Sarah Chen was optimistic that she would be able to return home within a few days. But outside her medical facility, the human colony was transforming into something that would have been unrecognizable just a week earlier. The gentle, cooperative settlement that had welcomed alien visitors and traded peacefully with a dozen different species had become a fortress manned by humans who were prepared to fight to the death to protect their children. And across human space, similar transformations were taking place as humanity revealed the true nature of the species that had conquered the most dangerous world in the galaxy. 3 months after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, Maya Chen took her first steps outside the medical facility that had been her home during her recovery. Her left arm was still supported by a lightweight brace that the automated reconstruction systems had built into her bone structure. But Dr. Sarah Chen had pronounced her healing complete and cleared her to return to normal activities. Maya herself was excited to go home, though she was puzzled by the changes that had occurred in her colony during her confinement. "Mama, why are there so many new buildings?" she asked as her parents walked her through the transformed streets of New Geneva Colony. "And why do all the grown-ups look so serious?" Lin Chen exchanged glances with her husband David, both of them struggling to find age-appropriate ways to explain the galactic crisis that had erupted because of their daughter's assault. They had decided to shield Maya from the knowledge of how her suffering had triggered a war between species, hoping to preserve her childhood innocence for as long as possible. "Well, sweetie," Lin said carefully, "after your accident, people decided that our colony needed to be safer, so they built some new things to help protect everyone who lives here." Maya accepted this explanation with the trusting nature of a child, though she couldn't help noticing that many of the new things looked like the defensive installations she had seen in her school lessons about Earth's history. As they walked toward their family home, they passed construction crews installing what appeared to be weapons emplacements disguised as decorative sculptures, and Maya saw adults carrying tools that looked more like weapons than anything needed for peaceful colonist work. What Maya didn't know, and what her parents hoped she would never need to learn, was that New Geneva had become the symbolic heart of humanity's transformation from peaceful galactic citizens to something far more dangerous. The colony where an innocent child had been assaulted by an alien authority figure had become a pilgrimage site for humans throughout the galaxy, a place where people came to remember why they were fighting and to renew their commitment to protecting their own. The medical facility where Maya had recovered was now surrounded by a memorial garden where thousands of humans had left flowers, toys, and messages of support. Children from dozens of human worlds had sent drawings showing Maya as a brave princess who had awakened the sleeping dragons that protected humanity. Adults had left letters promising that no human child would ever again suffer what Maya had endured, and that the galaxy would learn to respect the species that had conquered Earth. Admiral Elena Vasquez had returned to Earth to oversee the trials of war leader Krexkin and the surviving Vorthak crew members who had been captured during the destruction of their fleet. The proceedings were being broadcast throughout human space and to alien governments as a demonstration of human justice in action. The trials were conducted with meticulous attention to legal procedure, but the outcomes were never in doubt. Krexkin sat in a specially constructed defendant's chair that accommodated his alien physiology while ensuring he couldn't escape or threaten anyone in the courtroom. His compound eyes tracked the human judge, jury, and spectators with the nervous intensity of a predator who had suddenly found himself transformed into prey. The evidence against him was overwhelming, not just for his role in authorizing the assault on Maya Chen, but for decades of similar incidents involving Vorthak forces and civilians from other species. War Leader Krexken, Judge Patricia Morrison said as she prepared to deliver the sentence that had been predetermined by human military law. This court finds you guilty of crimes against humanity, conspiracy to commit genocide, and violation of the galactic treaties protecting non-combatant children. Under the laws of the Human Defense Forces, the penalty for these crimes is death. Krexkin's translator rendered his response in mechanical tones that couldn't convey the terror and desperation in his clicking vocalizations. Human judge, I demand to be tried under galactic law by the council courts. Your species has no authority to execute members of the hegemony military forces. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change as she delivered the response that would define humanity's new relationship with the galactic community. War Leader, when your subordinate assaulted Maya Chen, you forfeited any right to protection under galactic law. When your government threatened to enslave human children and burn human worlds, you declared war on humanity itself. You will be executed tomorrow at dawn, and your death will serve as a warning to any being who considers harming our young. The execution of Krexken and his senior officers was carried out with the same methodical precision that humans had brought to their military response. The event was broadcast to every alien government in the galaxy, ensuring that the message was received and understood by species that had previously considered humanity too weak to pose any serious threat. But the trials and executions were only the beginning of humanity's response to the threat against their children. Across human space, research facilities were developing new technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. Military factories were producing ships and weapons that incorporated principles discovered during humanity's hidden centuries of advanced development. Most importantly, human society was organizing itself around a single, unshakable principle. Never again would anyone be allowed to harm a human child. Dr. Amanda Foster's research team had expanded from a small academic project to a massive military intelligence operation that analyzed every known alien species for potential threats to human security. Their work had revealed disturbing patterns of behavior among several galactic civilizations, including evidence of systematic abuse of young beings from other species that the Galactic Council had chosen to ignore or minimize. We've been naive, Dr. Foster explained to Admiral Webb during one of their regular briefings. We assumed that intelligence and spaceflight capability indicated moral development, but our research shows that many alien species view the young of other species as acceptable targets for violence, exploitation, or worse. The Council's legal system is designed to protect the interests of powerful civilizations, not vulnerable individuals. Admiral Webb studied the reports that detailed decades of incidents similar to Maya's assault, cases where alien authorities had harmed children from less powerful species and faced minimal consequences. The pattern that emerged was clear. The galactic community operated according to principles of power and dominance that humans had naively failed to recognize. Doctor, what are your recommendations for protecting human children in mixed alien environments? Dr. Foster's response would have shocked the academic colleagues who had known her as a peaceful researcher interested in promoting interspecies understanding. Admiral, based on our analysis, I recommend complete separation of human children from alien populations until we can establish protocols that guarantee their safety. Furthermore, I recommend that any alien found guilty of harming a human child face immediate execution, regardless of their species' political status or diplomatic immunity. The implementation of these recommendations led to the most significant change in human society since their expansion into space. Human colonies began instituting strict segregation policies that limited alien access to areas where children lived, played, and attended school. Human ships and stations implemented security protocols that treated any alien as a potential threat until proven otherwise. Most significantly, humanity began developing the technological and military capabilities needed to enforce these policies against any alien government that objected. The Galactic Council's attempts to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the crisis were hampered by humanity's complete loss of trust in alien institutions. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had returned to the council chambers, but her role had changed from diplomatic representative to humanity's messenger, delivering ultimatums rather than participating in negotiations. "Honored representatives," she said during what would be her final address to the council, "humanity has reached certain conclusions about our place in the galactic community. We have concluded that this community does not share our values regarding the protection of young beings. We have concluded that the Council's legal and ethical frameworks are inadequate to protect human children from alien violence. And we have concluded that humanity must take responsibility for ensuring the safety of our own species." Chancellor Velter attempted to maintain the diplomatic protocols that had governed galactic relations for centuries. "Ambassador Vasquez, surely humanity recognizes that the assault on young Maya Chen was an isolated incident, not representative of the broader galactic community's values. Surely there is room for negotiation and compromise that would address your concerns while maintaining the cooperative relationships that have brought peace and prosperity to our galaxy." Ambassador Vasquez's response shattered any remaining hope for a diplomatic solution. "Chancellor, our research has identified over 3,000 similar incidents involving alien violence against human children over the past 50 years. These incidents were systematically covered up, minimized, or ignored by the Council's judicial system. Maya Chen was not an isolated victim. She was simply the most recent in a pattern of abuse that we will no longer tolerate." The data that humanity presented to support their claims sent shockwaves through the alien governments represented in the Council. Species that had prided themselves on their civilized nature found themselves confronting evidence of their own citizens' violence against human children, violence that had been dismissed as cultural misunderstandings or minor diplomatic incidents. "Furthermore," Ambassador Vasquez continued, "humanity formally withdraws from all galactic treaties and institutions that failed to protect our children. We will establish our own legal frameworks, our own security protocols, and our own systems for ensuring that human beings can live and work throughout the galaxy without fear of alien violence." The implications of humanity's withdrawal from galactic institutions were staggering. Human colonies controlled critical trade routes. Human research facilities had developed technologies that many alien civilizations depended upon, and human military forces had demonstrated capabilities that could challenge any alien government. The cooperative, integrated galactic community that had existed for centuries was dissolving as humanity established itself as a separate and potentially dominant power. Back on New Geneva, Maya Chen was adapting to her new life in a world that had been transformed by her suffering. She attended school with other human children in facilities that were now protected by defensive systems that could repel alien military attacks. She played in parks that were surrounded by security barriers designed to keep out any alien presence. Most importantly, she was surrounded by adults who had pledged that nothing like her assault would ever happen to any human child again. Maya herself remained largely unaware of the broader implications of her experience. To her, the changes in her colony were simply part of growing up, like learning to read or mastering arithmetic. She knew that she had been hurt by someone who looked different from her family and friends, but she didn't understand that her pain had triggered a transformation that would affect the entire galaxy. Her recovery had been complete, with no lasting physical effects from the assault. The automated medical systems had rebuilt her damaged bones with materials stronger than what nature had provided, and the trauma counseling she had received had helped her process the emotional impact of her experience. She was, by every measure that mattered to her parents, a normal 8-year-old girl who loved drawing, playing with friends, and learning about the world around her. But Maya's normality existed within a context that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. She lived in a human enclave that was effectively a sovereign territory within alien space, protected by weapons and defenses that could challenge the military forces of entire civilizations. She was growing up in a society that had organized itself around ensuring her safety and the safety of children like her, regardless of the cost to galactic peace and cooperation. As Maya walked through her transformed colony, holding her parents' hands and asking innocent questions about the changes around her, she represented both the vulnerability that had triggered humanity's transformation and the precious innocents that they were fighting to protect. The galaxy had learned that humans would go to any length, pay any price, and fight any enemy to keep their children safe. The age of naive cooperation was over. The age of human dominance was beginning, and at its heart lay a simple principle that every alien government was learning to respect: threaten a human child and face the consequences of awakening the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. The Deathworlders had revealed their true nature, and the galaxy would never be the same.